Let's hold on here. Peter D's here. Let's let him in. Why'd you have to turn your camera on?
I can turn it off.
If we've already seen you now, he can't undo it.
Look, I can show you something different other than this ugly mug. Look at this.
Oh,
there's Oscar.
Hey, puppy dog. Hey, puppy dog.
He's getting big. He's got hair on his eye.
Yes, he's it. I'm a puppy dog.
The reason why I wanted to come in the first place was about the whole Bruen thing. We were talking about it the other night, and I know I'm not going to change your mind about it, so I'm not going to try to change your mind, because your mind is made up. But my point is that, so I can't speak to Washington politics at all, of course, but I can speak to Vermont politics, and they just passed laws this year that were a 72-hour waiting period and like safe storage or secure storage and some other kind of bullshit too, like some red flag stuff. And so my whole point about the Bruen thing is that the legislators are still going to pass laws like this, even though they know that the Bruen case was decided. And like you say, sometimes they're just trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But the point is that if they're going to pass a shit ton of laws that we're expected to follow, and then it takes, 3 or 4 or 5 years to get through the courts, even if the courts decide in our favor, then what's the fucking point for the optimism? Because that's still 3, 4, 5, 10 fucking years that we have.
It doesn't take 3, 4, 5, 10 years. It usually takes a year to 2 years before something works its way to the Supreme Court. We're within that year still right now. Already, since Bruen has been decided, the average success rate of a challenge to anti-Second Amendment gun laws was about 4% before Heller. After Heller, it jumped up to about 12%. Now, after Bruen, it's up to almost 20% of all challenges against Second Amendment laws are successful in the courts, even in the lower courts. So that's like a 5 times greater rate right there. Now, that's still 4 out of 5 lawsuits failing, but you got to remember, a lot of lawsuits fail because they get declared you don't have standing, or you filed something wrong, or you got to go back to the court. Also, if you take into account ones that have been sent back to the lower courts from the higher courts to be reconsidered, even though they're taking as long as they possibly can to do it, because these are usually anti-gun states that they're getting sent back to, there's still a time limit on how long they can stall it before the Supreme Court will step in again. And right now we're well within those time frames. Pretty soon they won't be within those time frames anymore. Also, when you're upset about laws like safe storage laws, which are unenforceable, and any law enforcement person will tell you they're unenforceable, and things like that, if it wasn't for decisions like Bruen, you wouldn't be worried about that. You'd be worried about you can't buy guns that have more than 10 rounds, period, or you can't buy anything that has a detachable magazine. Those are the things you would be dealing with, or you can't carry a gun outside your home, period. They aren't even trying that anymore because they know that ain't going to stand. And that would be a direct violation of Bruen. The part of Bruen that deals with those things like you're talking about is the part where Clarence Thomas said that any gun law has to bear historical scrutiny. But that's not the direct decision from Bruen. What Bruen directly decided is that every citizen has a right to carry a firearm outside their home for self-defense. And since that's been decided, none of those laws are standing, period. Every case is being successful once it's heard. So it'll take time for it to all go through, and it'll also take time before people start making the major challenges. Secondary ruling of Bruen, which was basically just, him adding at the end in his judgment that any gun law has to be able to withstand court scrutiny. That doesn't automatically invalidate any law that can't withstand historical scrutiny, because every one of those cases will have to be decided on whether or not they face whether they can stand up to historical scrutiny. Meaning, anytime a state says, hey, well, historically, this was a law, so we can do it. Like Vermont, one of the things they said is they had this big article in one of the big newspapers about, in 1710, it was illegal to do this and this with a gun in the colonies. Well, yeah, in 1710, we weren't the United States. That was an English law. So it does not bear historic scrutiny based on our Constitution, because you're justifying it with laws that were before the Constitution was written. So those cases, though, will have to be decided on their own, because you can't just say no gun law can stand up to historic scrutiny, because there were some gun laws, but that'll be a separate case whatsoever. But since Bruen, like I said, since Heller, Bruen, used to be gun right cases succeeded at a rate less than 4%. Now it's up to 20. And that's even with cases that get dismissed because of standing, etc. So it's a noticeable difference. And I know some people don't notice that difference because they're not as involved and they don't hear what's going on behind the scenes, where politicians have to say things like, well, we got to get creative because we can't do this anymore. So we got to try to do something that will satisfy the anti-gun people who give us lots of money. So, but they can't just deny you your outright right to carry a gun, because it's been decided now that is a primary right of any citizen in the United States. It's as clear cut and dried as your First Amendment right now, according to the Supreme Court and the Constitution. So to say that doesn't really make a difference, it requires living in a bubble. And I know there are a lot of people that want to maintain that bubble, because a lot of people like the GOA, they want to maintain that bubble, that your rights are still 100% at risk, because they want you to give them money. And the talking heads on the internet that want to toe the GOA line because they give them money will tell you the same thing. But if you look at the statistics, if you look at how lawsuits are faring, if you look at what lawsuits are being sent back to the states to be reconsidered by the Supreme Court, if you look at the decisions the actual Supreme Court have made, we've had more progress in the last 5 years, 10 years than we had in decades up to that. And to ignore that requires, like I said, an absence of facts. So, because the facts show otherwise.
Well, the other night I was just trying to push buttons, basically, when I said that it doesn't make any difference at all. Of course, it will make some difference, but to me, it's personal here, because I'm reading things online, like when they did it a couple months ago when they were passing the laws, from legislators. I couldn't find the quote, but I've seen it before, that say, yeah, we know this might not stand in court, but like basically we have to do something anyway, So to me, it's just fucking crazy that they know something might not stand, but they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. You know what I mean?
That happens in every state, depending on which way your state goes. If you live in a state like Illinois or California or Vermont, well, then it goes like that for gun laws. If you live in states like Texas, look at how many healthcare laws that have been overturned in the last year. In Florida, how many healthcare laws have been overturned that the right had put in place, knowing they weren't constitutional, but did it anyway because of how they have to keep the Christian conservatives happy. That's going to happen all the time. That's what the courts are there for. And that's why most of these laws go into, if they're clearly unconstitutional and there's a sign that people are going to be harmed, like saying you can't carry a gun, that would be showing you're going to be harmed and you'll get a stay. If it's something like safe storage, well, it's unenforceable anyway. It's not likely to be enforced anytime soon. So you might not get a stay on something like that because there's not likelihood that anyone will be harmed before it actually goes to court. But like I said, we're winning. And to say things like constitutional decisions from the Supreme Court don't make a difference, they make a huge difference.
Yeah. One of my problems with the court system is that in 10 years from now it could be a totally different court, and they just went back and overturned Roe v. Wade. So who's to say in 10 or 15 years they're not going to overturn the Bruen decision?
Well, they could. That's why I said in 15, 20 years, they could very easily. It's going to take a long time to change the court's makeup again, but in 20 years, they could very easily reverse Bruen. But that's not how you deal with what's happening right now. What you deal with what's happening right now is you try to take the steam out of the movement. You actually defeat it every chance you get in court, and you have to start trying to broaden your tent. Even though they've overturned Roe v. Wade, that's probably not going to stand much longer. And what it's probably going to cause is most states to legalize abortions through legislation inside the state, even though they didn't want to do that before. And it'll only be a few states where it's illegal, because right now they're having a tidal wave, even of Republicans, when in most things, 65% of Republicans don't agree with Roe v. Wade being overturned. Politicians in swing states or liberal states that are Republicans are panicking. You got people saying on the floor of the United States House that a Republican will never get elected in this state again. A Republican will never get elected in that state again because of this. So we have to do something. So we have to get it to where it'll be like that with Bruen. We have to get enough people on our side to where if they ever tried to overturn it, it would be like a Democrat will never get elected again in 90% of the states. But until we do that, to do that, we have to get out of our own fucking way and stop being so divisive and stop being so centered on every fucking right-wing cause that comes along, and keeping assholes on the internet, YouTube people, from defending every fucking cop that kills someone unjustly because they're, I was a cop, so fuck the other people. Until we stop doing all the shit that makes everybody else hate the right-wing gun community or even consider the gun community right-wing, then we're not ever going to get that way. And then when they do overturn it in 20 years, then that'll just be the way it is. And I've said that repeatedly.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. I think we're definitely not going to bring the people who we need to bring over to this side with all the anti-trans and that type of ideology that's constantly on the right. And it's pretty clear that the United States as a whole is becoming more accepting of things like trans rights and gay rights and stuff. So I think it's time for the right to stop railing against those things and start including people. I did want to say quickly, I believe I read that for another effect from Bruen is that it has to, as far as having historical significance, it has to fit within some time frame. It
has to have been something that was has a historic precedent in the United States before it can be a law.
Right. Well, it was something like late 1700s to early 1800s. I don't know why I was mentioning that time frame. I saw something in here. So Mike D is saying that all the cases before the courts in Illinois have lost.
Well, we lose here in the state too. Usually if you're in a really anti-gun state, you'll lose because the Supreme Court is political. It's stacked by whoever's run that state for the last 20 years. Like here, it's all fucking Democrats and anti-gunners, etc. So we don't expect to win inside the state. You have to fight inside the state first, though, and lose there before it moves on. It's like in Illinois. Yeah, they lost in Illinois, but the case right now is still in front of the Supreme Court. Is it the ISRA case? That's still got to be heard by the Supreme Court, and that's going to be when it makes a difference. No one expected it to win in Illinois. That's like asking people, taking something the politicians did to their pets that they appointed to those positions, because Supreme Court justices in most states are just appointed by the governor and the politicians, the state body. So they're basically politicians. So you get out of that state before you start making a difference. You have to get to where you're looking at federal courts and the Supreme Court. But like I said, even in Illinois, where the Supreme Court said, yeah, this is nothing wrong with this. Yeah, assault weapon bans have precedent, even though there's no fucking precedent for assault weapons ban. You can't possibly even make one. And even other justices on that court, I think it was like 4-3 decision, said that the reasoning of the majority made no sense. It was just a gobbledygook of words that didn't make any sense. So when it goes to the Supreme Court, which the case is still pending for, I believe it's who was running that? Illinois State Rifle Association. That's the ISRA. They still have their case going before the Supreme Court. In fact, Richard Pearson, the executive director of Illinois State Rifle Association, said that no one should be surprised by this because they aren't surprised by this when they're referring to the Illinois Supreme Court upholding the ban. He says, but you shouldn't lose hope because our real chance was our federal case, the ISRA case, which we expect to go before the Supreme Court soon, will prove to be a victory, not just for law-abiding gun owners in Illinois, but across the country. And that's the end goal of anybody who files a lawsuit inside of one of these anti-gun states, because they know they're going to have to lose their way through the state and then fight it on a bigger stage.
Yeah, I don't mean to like keep bringing this back to me and my lived experience here, but like, and keep bringing it back to Vermont. But I fear that's what's going to happen in Vermont too, because I know the makeup of our court and previous decisions. But if it goes through court systems and it's found to be constitutional, and then it has to go to the Supreme Court from there, I guess, right? That's what I'm saying is it's just more time and more time and more time that we are expected to follow these types of laws. I know you agree, but there should be some type of consequence for these fucking people.
They don't expect anybody really to follow the laws when they pass these laws. In fact, they know that if they even try to enforce them, it'll bite them in the ass, and they'll end up with lots of lawsuits against them for trying to enforce an unconstitutional law, which is why most sheriff's departments, etc., state police, local police even won't enforce them because they don't want to take the legal liability. The only people they usually enforce these laws against are dealers. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to run the dealers out of business before the lawsuits get settled. But the chances of them enforcing it against a person, it's like the chances of them convicting a person in the state of Washington for having a magazine that's more than 10 rounds is almost zero. And they would never even try. Chances of them getting a dealer for selling 10-round plus magazines, well, yeah, that they've already done. That's the whole goal, is to get rid of the dealers.
There was a guy up here a couple of years ago who he was prosecuted for going across state lines and buying magazines, but I believe it was a secondary thing. It was like he was pulled over for something else. He might have had drugs or something. I'm pretty sure it was like a secondary charge. But well, still,
that's so that you'll plea deal to a main charge.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't. I'd be like, yeah, push that through. Try to do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
If that was your only charge, yeah, I'd be like, yeah, take me to court. I've said that to politicians here. I was like, I would love to see you take someone to court on that, because if you want to find someone, I've told politicians right to their face, I've broke this law. Why don't you go get the sheriff, have him arrest me so that you and I can discuss this in court? They ain't going to do that.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know. I guess my point is just that it's obviously everybody shares this sentiment, but it's just fucking frustrating, dude.
Yeah. And I know you don't like some of the things you're under right now. I don't like some of the things I'm under in Washington, but I'm waiting for it to play through the courts. But the things you're under aren't that bad. And there are places like New Jersey now where people are getting carry permits that they couldn't before. There are people in California now that are getting carry permits, or at least have the process that couldn't before. So there's big changes gone on across the country. Look at how many states are now constitutional carry. And a lot of this is because of the decisions by the courts. Even in New Jersey, they had to back off when they found out, well, we got to start letting people carry. They started writing all these really restrictive laws. And then when they found out those weren't going to be constitutional, they had to back off those because their constituents were like, yeah, we don't want to pay for these lawsuits. So they backed off in New Jersey because they know they got enough Republicans there that it doesn't take a whole lot of Democrats to get pissed at them for wasting money for them to lose an election.
Yeah, right. I'm especially jaded up here, man, because for the longest time, we were so relaxed with gun laws, and then a Republican came into office saying that he doesn't believe that Vermont needs new gun laws right now. And then one of the very first things he did was sign five sweeping anti-gun bills. And since
now,
then,
in Vermont, can you get a carry permit?
We're constitutional carry. We've always been constitutional
So you're
carry.
constitutional carry. So the things you're worried about, you have magazine limits?
Now we do, yeah.
What's the magazine limit?
15 for a handgun, 10 for a long gun.
So that's really not even a magazine limit. 10 is more of a restriction because most guns don't have more than 15. And if you do, you're losing one or two. So in other words, it's really good in Vermont. You don't have that much to be all that upset about. So I would focus on that and see and be like, well, look, now that we got the Bruen, at least they can't do worse things. So they're doing all these little piddly things. That's actually the perfect example of what I was talking about. They're going to start doing every piddly little ridiculous thing they can do to make it look like they're doing something. And in some cases, they're going to throw things that are blatantly unconstitutional against the wall if you're in a state where they have enough money making it profitable. But generally, the things you had to worry about 10 years ago are not a worry now in most places.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think there's still plenty for me to be upset about, but that's just because we've never had to deal with it before. And it's even these things like red flag laws and safe storage and magazine limits are such a hardcore infringement when you've had nothing. You know what I mean? Like, yes, in the grand scheme of things, we're better off than a lot of places, but it's just such a fucking shock to the system when you've had nothing, and then all of a sudden you've got all this fucking shit, and everybody is in favor of it up here, seemingly, which is the worst part.
I'm sure there are challenges against them in the courts right now, probably going through it.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
But
all right, well, thanks for coming in. We're out of time.
Yeah, I know.
One more super chat.
I didn't mean to stay this long, but thank you very much.
No problem. Talk to you later.
All right,
I'll see you tomorrow.